our Lord Bishop, Most Reverend Professor Godfrey Webike Onah. You are welcome. Yesterday, we waited for you with extreme enthusiasm because we know you are a very serious professor of philosophy, basically. And now that we were filled up here yesterday waiting for you, and a lot of people have gone this morning, some yesterday, but it is okay. You sit down. May we sit down? Before the bishop came in, we called to the height. We call here inspirational table because if you say it is high, you may see that those people there, their own is higher than our own. But here, we are looking at this place as inspirational point, So, and we had called on Professor Lawrence Ugwanye, one of the persons who received fellowship yesterday, to come here. And then at your right is Reverend Father Dr. Martin Ferdinand Asebu. Then the head of Department of Philosophy here, Dr. Michael Chigozie here. Welcome. And then at the immediate left is the president of APON, distinguished Professor Aloysius Ihua. Professor Ihua is a quarter reverend father, so I...
He'll go back and Bishop.
He has gone beyond that. I wanted him to continue, but it won't work again. Then, distinguished Professor Prince Will Ihanyi Chukwu Alozie is here also. He's part of those I described yesterday as living ancestors in philosophy. And then Professor John Ebe is there. Distinguished Professor Ebe received our fellowship yesterday also. Thank you. And then my own and special in everything, distinguished Professor J.C.A. Abakoba. When I said my own, I'm privileged to be supervised by him, my first degree and my PhD. So that's why I'm saying I'm appropriate, So I thank everybody for coming. Yesterday when our Lord Bishop, we were almost ending and we got this inspiration also that he was going to come to talk with us today. And I had given indication that I was going to leave very early this morning because of the burial mass we have today. But I said, no, I'll listen to my Lord Bishop. I was telling Professor Alozie this morning that my Lord Bishop had become a political activist because I used to listen and watch his sermons every Sunday. And on our boy here, Data. So we are privileged. We are privileged to have him here today. Without wasting any further time, Mr. President, I think you have to talk so that you can recap what happened yesterday before he will now speak with us. Thank you.
The Lord Bishop, our distinguished professors, senior colleagues, the head of Department of Philosophy, esteemed members of Association of Philosophy Professionals, you are welcome this morning, the second day of our conference and meeting. I think on behalf of the association, I would like to tender apologies to our Lord Bishop for, first, the audience that we have here. Our intention was that he would have been around here yesterday when this hall was filled to capacity. One, with a background that we know him as an academic. And so everybody was enthusiastically waiting to hear from him. Unfortunately, we missed him, but fortunately, we have him today. My Lord Bishop, the theme of this year's conference is philosophy and the remaking of the Nigerian nation. Philosophy and the remaking of the Nigerian nation. In the very words of our ancient wisdom elders, we know that there will never be the end to the problems and the troubles of this nation, or any nation at all, until philosophers become kings or kings become philosophers. It is on that premise that this year's theme, philosophy and the making of the Nigerian nation, was crafted. Nigerian geography assumes to us that our diversity that should have been an advantage has been converted into disadvantage. Today, there are the jihadist group, variously baptized either as bandits, kidnappers, terrorists, or whatever any name that you give in a negative way, whose combined effort is ravaging the entire Nigerian nation. As philosophers who evaluate the ideas we live by, we have decided to think over our problems and to advance solutions. It is in the light of that that we gathered here and also requested your presence to also assist us based on your knowledge and experience and exposure in an attempt to resolve the Nigerian problems. We are delighted that you are here with us, and we will invite you, as you said, to interact with us. Our Lordship. Before that, may I please invite, is it your secretary or your personal assistant, as it is in our tradition, to read your citation or at least to say one thing about your very person.
All protocol duly observed. It is my singular honor and privilege to introduce to this team of thinkers and learned scholars a pastor per excellence who has a burning interest in and who labors tirelessly for the well-being of the entire human person, mind, body, and soul. A man who is at once a grassroots evangelizer and a distinguished scholar of international repute. A peerless prince of the church who, even before he became a bishop, served in the highest administrative organ of the church at the universal level, the Synod of Bishops, as emeritus, an expert. A professor emeritus of philosophy in the prestigious Pontifical Urbanian University, Rome, in Italy. It may interest you to know that he is a former deputy vice chancellor of same university, the very first African to attain that height and hold the post in the university, and currently a member of the administrative board of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, CBCN, the immediate past pro-chancellor and chairman governing council of Veritas University, Abuja, and currently the pro-chancellor and chairman governing council, Enugu State University of Science and Technology, Nsukka. where he is currently serving the second term in office. Learned audience, it's my pleasure and singular privilege to introduce to you the Catholic Bishop of Nsukka Diocese, His Excellency, Most Reverend Professor Godfrey Onah.
Well, Your Lordship, we thank you. Now that they have told you are they have told us you are the Pro-Chancellor at Esut, we must introduce philosophy in Esut also. Thank you.
Father Paulinus, when I was debating with you at breakfast this morning whether you should be here or not, I didn't know you were only pretending. Since you already had an assignment to do things or something I don't think at all necessary. Because of all he said, the only thing I'm interested in is that I am a priest and the Bishop of Nsukka. And it is because of that that I would want to qualify, because I don't say disagree with, what my friend, where is he seated, the person who first spoke about me, Jerry, said. If you are a Christian and you describe me as a political activist, then you make me believe you have not been listening to my homilies, because I'm addressing Christians primarily, asking them to be good Christians in Nigeria to make things better. And that cannot be any more political than Jesus himself giving us the principle of political leadership and leadership in general by telling us that the greatest among us should be our servant. And if a person who says that is a political activist, then I accept the title. Otherwise, nothing I say from the pulpit can be removed from the gospel, because they're all flowing from the gospel message, and no attempt at all is made to instrumentalize my reflections on such sacred liturgical occasions. So, my dear friends, I begin with those on the inspirational table, and I'm happy with this name. The president and the facilitators, the organizers, I am happy to be here. I didn't think I needed any formal introduction because I thought I would just be coming to greet you and interact with you in order to help myself to somehow update, because any field of scholarship that you leave for as long as 9 years, you can no longer claim to be current in that field. For 9 years, I've not had the time to deepen philosophical reflection based on specific issues. All my philosophical reflection now is an application of the tool of philosophy to the message of the gospel for the good of God's children. I am particularly happy to be here. And I thank you also for creating this forum. I am sorry that I couldn't make it yesterday because the earlier schedule took my difficulties into consideration, and I was able to block a date for that encounter. Unfortunately, the situation on ground wouldn't allow me to be wouldn't allow that event to take place, this event to take place when it was earlier scheduled, and it's taking place only now. And I also congratulate you, all the leadership and all of you, for insisting on carrying on with this project in spite of the disruption caused by the strike action. And the theme you chose for this encounter could not have been better. That is philosophy and the remaking of the Nigerian nation. I was also pleasantly surprised by the change of name from National Association, Nigerian Association of Philosophers, something like that, Nigerian Philosophy Association, to National Association of Philosophy Professionals of Nigeria. That is very promising, because very often we make the funny mistake of thinking that every teacher of philosophy is a philosopher. It is very easy to be a teacher of philosophy without being a philosopher. Just as it is very easy to be a teacher of Christian theology without being a theologian. Because to be a theologian first, you have to believe, and then express what you believe through reason. And philosophy also, you can be a magazine, so to speak, a collector of philosophical doctrines without yourself being trained in the art of philosophizing. And so I think it was, I don't know whether it was Jacques Maritain or Derrida or one of them who said, when he was asked how many leading philosophers there were in continental Europe, he said it would be possible for him to say how many were teachers of philosophy, but he wouldn't be able to say how many were philosophers. Also, we make the mistake of thinking that philosophers are found only among the teachers and professors and students of philosophy. And I always remind people that even though this discipline of definitions is unable to define itself, there is one thing all of us will regard as common to the art of philosophy, and that is the method through which one arrives at one's conclusions. If I ask you, why are you doing a certain thing, and you tell me your father did it? Why are you holding a particular position, and you say your parents hold that same position? That position may be philosophically right, but your statement is not a philosophical statement. So there's something I call the reason for the rationality of our argument. That is what makes a reasoning process philosophical, in my own judgment. And I give one simple example. I am the light of the world. He who walks, or rather, let me leave that one. The truth will make you free. The truth will make you free is a religiously and theologically valid statement. And it is also a philosophically valid statement. How do I prove that it is a religiously and theologically valid statement? If I am a believer in God and in the God revealed by Jesus Christ, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, I just need to prove to you that that statement was made by Jesus Christ. And that is enough for me to show you that it is a theologically and religiously valid statement. But for me to demonstrate to you or prove to you that it is a philosophically valid statement, I have to, first of all, establish the relationship, first of all, the meaning of freedom, and the relationship between knowledge and freedom. And I will have to argue that freedom is based on choice, and choice is informed by knowledge. And the more you know the truth about the thing you are choosing, the more your choice will be an act of freedom. And in that case, the truth about the object of choice becomes something that really makes you a free human being. So it's not just enough to say, because this was said by our ancestors, or by Aristotle, or by Hegel, or by Kant, then it is philosophically valid. Otherwise, we would accept Kant's statement that anything said by a black man is stupid for the simple fact that that person is black. And that was written down by Kant, not to talk of the ones Hegel, Hume, and others wrote. So the point I'm making is that being a professional in philosophy just then means that you have made it a profession to arrive at certain conclusions using a process and categories that are open to philosophical debates in all areas of that engagement, irrespective of the person who is concerned. That's why I'm sometimes tragically amused when some of us sick and bent in their reasoning by some form of inferiority complex, cultural inferiority complex, think that for philosophy to be African, it must be a museum of the collection of the proverbs of our ancestors. Now, I'll just have this to say about your choice of theme, how happy I am about it. I think you will all remember the famous statement by Hegel in his preface to the Philosophy of Rights, when he affirms that with regard to saying how the world is, philosophy always arrives too late. Because philosophy only realizes after things have been done that it then has to reflect on things that have already taken place. And he compares that to the owl of Minerva, that spreads its wing when it is already dark. And one of his most illustrious disciples, whom many people don't know was a Hegelian because he stood Hegel on his head, I'm talking about Karl Marx. Hegel, in his idealism, gave the impression that he was concerned only about the spiritual. And Marx and people like him, Feuerbach before him, Arnold Ruge, and others, showed that Hegel was really not the idealist people thought he was. And he was not really the defender of Christian religion that people thought he was, but an anti-Christian and anti-God, so to speak. Now, this illustrious disciple of Hegel, Karl Marx, in his own time, I think it is in the 11th of his thesis on Feuerbach, there he stated that philosophy has only succeeded in interpreting the world in various ways. What now remains is for it to change the world. I read in both positions a type of diffidence on the part of those who make them on the capacity of philosophical thought to make some concrete change on the way things are in the world. If Hegel says that philosophy arrives only too late, he's, so to speak, saying or suggesting that there is little philosophy can do to change the way history evolves. And if Marx now says, almost like ridiculing philosophy, well, you have succeeded in interpreting the world in diverse ways, but you can't do anything to change it. I know I'm forcing this interpretation because that is not what he said. I'm only trying to say, perhaps this was what he meant. But supposing that was what he meant, one only needs to remind oneself of the influence that Hegelian thought had on the history of civilization in Europe, and by implication on the rest of the world. But more than Hegel, Karl Marx, I'm sure, as defective as some of his thoughts were, I'm sure Marx never imagined the enormous amount of impact that his philosophical thoughts would make on the world. And any of us who is not aware of how much Marx has bequeathed history since his time is neither a serious scholar of philosophy nor a serious scholar of human history. I just want to use that to emphasize that even while some philosophers think that there is little professionals of philosophy can do in changing, and in this case, in remaking the Nigerian nation, history teaches us the contrary. Marx, Hegel, Kant, these here were all heirs of older traditions of philosophical thought that changed history. Move further back in European history of philosophy until you arrive at Plato and his disciple Aristotle, and you will understand what I'm saying. The environment we are sitting in now, the university environment, all developed within philosophical settings primarily. If you go back, those of you who have had more time to investigate the origins of Egyptian thought, we realize that irrespective of the religious environment within which philosophical thought arose in Egypt, it was precisely the philosophical content more than the religious content of the thought of those Egyptian priests that drove the change in Egyptian history. The same thing with Plato and his academy. It was Plato's frustration with the political class of his time, whether they were the aristocrats or the democrats, who both disappointed him. On the one hand, the aristocrats would not allow truth. On the other hand, the Democrats were afraid of truth also, which led them to the murder of his own master, Socrates. And in frustration, he used the money he got as gift from a friend to establish the academy, where he insisted that looking at the scenario in Athens, it was no longer necessary to form a new political group. What was expedient as at that time was to create a new class of thinkers who would critically revolutionize governance and government in Athens. That was the earliest origin of modern European philosophy. University, before eventually the academy was destroyed and the university was revived by the Catholic Church within the monasteries in the 11th and 12th centuries. You are more familiar with this history than I am, because ask me now the meaning of Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. I'll be more current on that one. So, now, we are in a situation in our country, Nigeria, now, when everybody seems to admit that things have failed. The government, various successive governments have failed us. Since the return to democracy, we have had about one political party or another, and the two prominent ones now are People's Democratic Party that started, and now All Progressive Congress, the APC. And Nigerians are saying that both have failed. And Nigerians are hoping that the salvation for Nigeria will come from a new political party. Nothing can be more illusionary than that. my position, first and foremost, there are no political parties in Nigeria. What you have in Nigeria are political platforms for remaining in power, acquiring illegal wealth, and avoiding prosecution. These are platforms people use to remain in power in order to be able to embezzle money and avoid prosecution. And that explains why the same people who were in PDP, by the time there will be a change of government and they don't get a ticket from PDP for the position they are seeking, they change to another party where they hope to win, and PDP becomes the worst political party in Nigeria. And if they were in APC and they don't get the ticket for the position they want, they all move to PDP or Labour Party and hope then that by being in a new party, they will get what they want, and that's the only time they accept that either APC or PDP were not functional political parties. Now, like Plato, I am insisting, and that is the central message I have, and that is why I congratulate you. I'm insisting that what we need in Nigeria is not a new political party, but a new set of people who will think differently about our nation, what it means to be a nation, the difference between a nation and a country, and what we need to do right in order to move this nation forward. I'm also happy and impressed about the sub-themes that I saw in the online flyer of your program, because those sub-themes capture the areas of problem in our nation, things that have been holding us back, attachment to geographical areas, greed, unaccountability, and all such things. I only want to encourage us to continue to ask these questions and to reflect upon them. But let us not forget that the primary crisis of thought in Nigeria now is thought about the meaning of life. What I consider the primary crisis of thought in Nigeria is thought on the meaning of life. Because never in our history has life been so cheap and human dignity so low. What does it mean to be a human being? And if we bear in mind that values are all arranged in an order according to their relationship to the protection of life and making life better, then we understand how important it is for us to understand, first of all, what it means to be a human being, to be alive. And it's only in that sense that we can then begin to ask, what can one do in politics in order to improve the quality of life and to raise the level of human dignity in our country, Nigeria. These are important areas. Finally, because Ojukwu says, because I'm involved. Because I'm involved, I will end on this point. The relationship between religion and development. In a country where religion plays so much role in the life of the people, philosophy has to consistently examine what it means to be religious and what role religion should play in the discernment or distillation of values and their hierarchical arrangement. Because this crisis is worldwide. The crisis between religion and public life is worldwide, but our own is very particular. In Europe and America and Australia, the crisis expresses itself in the postmodern expression of secularism. What does secularism say in short? Secularism wants to put aside God and religion and install the human being and human freedom. But what it actually does is that it substitutes an absolute uncreated God with a contingent manipulable concept. Because in that case then, for instance, cause, pure chance takes the place of God in the act, in the role of the origin of the universe and the way it is arranged. And they attribute to pure chance exactly the role that believers attribute to God, with a difference, that pure chance has no personal will, cannot love and be loved. What does that entail? It excuses every individual from personal responsibility. Because if you accuse me of crime, I can easily tell you that is how I was made, by pure chance. And if you say I should be living like a man, but I'm living like a woman, I tell you pure chance has made it even in such a way that I don't know whether I'm a man or a woman. Today I can be man, tomorrow I can be woman, next tomorrow I can be neither, because it is all the product of chance. That is what the crisis of religion has brought in the Western world. I don't like using the term West because it is discriminatory. In a globe, in a world that is supposed to be spherical, no place is permanently east or permanently west. So let's leave that. I'm just talking about specific areas of the world. Then in our own context, we have classes of people who have turned religion into, one set is businessmen and power merchants. People who want to use religion to make money and people who want to use religion to acquire wealth. And then you have now cultists who are transforming cultism into a religion. The so-called return to traditional religion is nothing but exaltation of cultism. Because in the traditional religion of the Igbo man, for instance, that some of us met, there was no compulsion except when public order was involved. Everybody was free to worship God the way he wanted, and even to change his own gods. Such a pragmatic religion cannot be the basis of the intolerant cultism that we are now experiencing as African or Igbo traditional religion. And all that has implication for nationhood, nation building, governance, and then, of course, for responsibility. Because without clear definition of the human nature, of human freedom, and to whom we are all eventually responsible, then arbitrary decisions can easily be taken by those who have the privilege of controlling the rest. And of course, in that type of context, there can be no nation building. I wanted only to greet you. So thank you very much, and God bless.
Please, I think we can do better. Can we be on our feet to give our keynote speaker a resounding round of applause? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's have our seats. I think this greeting is more than greeting. This greeting is I will call it an intellectual feast. Thank you very much, my Lord, for this eloquent presentation and for the points made. So as we move ahead now, we'll take one or two questions based on what the bishop has said, and then we'll give him time to respond to those questions before we move to the next item for our program. Is there a second microphone? No. Then I have to take this one round.
Thank you, Father Bishop. Innocent Enwe, Department of Philosophy, University of Nigeria, Nsukka. He's my Father Bishop, so I am his son also. Yes, I'm excited coming out because I feel personally happy today with this conference because I've listened finally to two great minds, if you like. The first was Father Gwejofo. We were listening to him by the time you came, and the hall wasn't quite, so we felt it is good we allow you some, and thanks to the executives, they were able to organize that. And now we have just listened to Father Bishop. When Father Gwejofo addressed us, I would say, from my own understanding, his paper was a reorientation of philosophy for Africans. And quite challenging, even those who raised questions, I beg to differ with some of them because there were really no questions. They were just giving their own views, which were not contradictory to these views, but they could run parallel but not contradictory. So in that case, they could just be adapted, if you like. So if we really understand what Obi was telling us. Now you have addressed us, and as I was listening to you, I saw the same line of thought. The final word for Obi use is, he calls it transvaluation of African philosophy. When you talked of, made allusion to Socrates, that's where I'm now linking you to be, and then, we see two of you saying the same thing in terms of what philosophy can do for us. Now, my only question is when it comes to politics. There are other sides, but by way of, I don't know whether it's, question actually, so that you clarify. And that is when you talked of cross-carpeting, let me put it that way. That should be the technical word for it. The politicians leaving one party to another party. This question is important to me because I'm obedient, actually. So I'm speaking with prejudice. Okay? I'm speaking with prejudice, okay? Yes, and you believe in prejudice in any case. You have always advocated that. In this case, I'm speaking with prejudice. Okay, so the point is this. I have this feeling that the way you presented it, that is the idea of, I call it denigrating the concept of cross-carpeting. I have that impression. So if you tell us, for instance, that when it is a fact, what you are saying, but the problem with me is the interpretation of the fact. The idea of moving from one party, which politicians do, that is a fact that they do that. And what you said is also arguably so, that they move from one party to another party to get a platform to remain in power, and then so on and so forth. That's a good summary, he said. But my problem there is that it does not take into consideration the possibility that somebody leaves the party because of injustice, okay, and then he feels within himself that there's something to give, and then injustice to give it, and then that's the real injustice, and then he moves out of the party as a platform like you call it to do things better. That's just my problem. Okay.
One by one. It's okay.
Thank you very much. Correct. Father Enwe, you are correct. An interpretation of my statement could mean that. But my emphasis is that the mere change of party is not the solution to the problem, but change of thought pattern and orientation. That's just what I mean. One is justified in thinking that this party has betrayed the ideas for which I joined it, and then leaves that party to another. But we have seen how these movements are going. somebody who is accused of embezzling public funds as a governor and is pursued by the finance agency, and the chairman of a ruling party tells him, only change party and your sins will be forgiven. And he does that actually. The case is withdrawn from EFCC and he's made a federal minister. And that is the point. So such acts overshadow all the other intentions that may be on the ground for the smaller persons. Just like all those who move from the Catholic Church to another church in search of miracles and solution to their individual problems, the day they don't get it in any of those churches, they will go back to the dibia in Enugu. So their problem is not with the content of Christianity, but with what they want out of Christianity. So that's just the point I'm making.
Thank you very much. I find the conversations quite interesting. For those of us who follow conversations on social media, particularly Twitter, those who are obedient are always violent, as they say it. Yes, violence. And obedient is trying to express the same violence here this morning. Dr. Achibong.
Thank you very much, my Lord Bishop, for the honor to sit under your talk. Okay, yeah, I will say that my name is Dr. Emmanuel Achibong. I'm the PRO of this association. I want to redirect our minds back to the clash of worldviews. And I wouldn't want us to actually downplay on it because it's a very serious issue, talking about the contrast between materialism and idealism. And you made reference to Karl Marx and Hegel. And of course, the two of them represent these two worldviews. Now, I want to know, sir, how do we reintegrate these worldviews or these values that traditional Africa is known for with regards to strengthening our institution? I'm talking about the issue of trying to get us back to the place of idealistic values that we have lived our lives by as Africans within the context of developing Africa.
With regard to obedience being violent, the easiest way to radicalize a human being is to marginalize him. And sometimes we forget that some of these people are just giving back what society has put in them. I'm not defending any act of violence. Anybody who knows me knows that whether in words, action, or posture, or even attitude, I detest violence. And with regard to your observation, I would say that part of our problem is that we don't have the courage to be ourselves, use what we have, acquire from other people, and improve on what we have. There is, for instance, nothing African in this building because our architects seem entirely oblivious of our weather, of the strength of the sun and the wind and heat, humidity, and our ancestors built bearing that in mind with the resources they had. What we should be doing is, this is what we had in a society that was simpler. Now the society is more complex, but we also have ideas from other places, and we have to enhance what we have. By the way, insisting on what we had because we had it, for me, is folly. People who insist on eating with their fingers because their ancestors ate with their fingers, they had no cutlery, please. If they had cutlery, they would have used it. A great friend of mine, up to today, sleeps in his wrapper. So no, umuwoke adeyi trouser larola na Igbo. That men don't sleep with trousers on in Igbo land. So they had no trousers. There is no word for trousers in Igbo language. So I'm only saying we assess what we have, and this is my emphasis on values and culture. What value were our ancestors trying to promote and defend when they did a certain thing? Is our present action still relevant in defending that value? I'll give one simple example and I'll let you talk. The killing of twins. Our people killed twins. Why? In Ethiopia, ancient Ethiopia, every pregnant woman had to, in a tribe of Ethiopia, not all, had to give birth alone in the forest. Alone in the forest. And if the offspring, if the product of the childbirth were twins, she would decide on which one to suppress and bury before returning to the community. Because if she gave birth to twins, both the woman and the twins would be killed. The reason was, one, the high mortality rate of twins and their mothers. They had no way of managing this situation. And as a means, instinct of survival of the species, they had to suppress this cause of death for the society. And they saw them as a curse. With better knowledge, we have come to understand that it was their limited information and limited resources that who still kills twins? We now go for assisted fertility, where women now produce 4 children at a go, irrespective of the moral objectionableness of the process, because it is now easier to maintain the life of both the mother and the offspring. So we have to ask for the value that our ancestors, our forefathers, were preserving by a particular cultural practice. Think of what we know now and how complex the society is in order to enhance that value, promote it. And of course, if we see that the value has become a disvalue, it has to be suppressed. Okay.
My Lordship, it's a privilege to sit here with you. I am not despising any other clergy, but from my point of view, I recognize 2 bishops in this country. Bishop Kuka of Sokoto and this, my Lordship. Yesterday when I was speaking, I said something about socialism. I said something about religion. Some people may be very angry, and I said, well, you forgive me if I've offended you. But here he is. He has spoken about Hegel. He has spoken about Marx. And he said, he quoted this other one. Philosophers have interpreted the world in various ways, but the major problem is to change it. And then Dr. Achibong was saying, there are 2 contradictory positions, materialism and idealism. I also did philosophy of science. And my Lordship, I was an atheist at a very young age, after primary school. And it is not that, and I became a socialist even before going to Moscow.
Really stop.
Okay. Even before traveling to Moscow to study. It was ironically in Moscow that I became convinced about the existence of Almighty God. And I have maintained that till now. And I tell the priests I meet that I believe in God not because of going to hell or heaven. And it has been helping. I do pray, and God answers my prayers. Now, I listen to your sermons whenever it is available in the social media. I enjoy it. There is an issue, though. I agree with you what you said about political parties. We don't have the political parties that will save us now. It is still true. But how to change it? My Lordship, you know that in history of the church inclusive, all changes in history have not been very peaceful. Even as we're talking now, Israel, that we talk about often, the Jews, they are still fighting. They are still preparing weapons of destruction. So here we are. We talk about our culture. We are not talking of developing technology. This thing now is a product of science and technology, what I'm using. My Lord, I think we should also try to encourage our people to go deep into science and technology. If we don't do that, we will perish. It has happened in Latin America, it happened in Australia, it happened in Canada. They cleared the people and repopulated it. Even some priests helped in Australia in liquidating the owners of the land. May that not happen to us. But not only a prayer issue, but we here, if we can carry it on, because the priests, special priests, not every kind of priests really, they have hearing, they have population, they influence people. So if we can encourage qualitative education that includes study of science and technology, then our religion would have landed. Then our philosophy would have landed properly. Then you can talk of African philosophy. That is my position, my Lord.
Thank you, Prof. But here I will be very brief. I agree with you. But of course, in an intervention like mine, I can't say everything, especially since I had no script in front of me. My position is that it can be argued that our ancestors were more scientifically and technologically creative than we are now. They evolved solutions to their problems, and we are consumers of those their solutions, even though the problems have changed. Let it be put on record worldwide. I have always called for scientists, technologists to invest time and money and study the principles of rainmaking and document them. I said it many times publicly. If a German had those principles, people would become professors of rainmaking now. But because it is Igbo and African, today professors of environmental and geology and brabadabam go to the rainmaker in the village and give him money and fowl and wine so that there will be no rain on the day of convocation. We have no shame. I met a German who has a company called the Rainmaker. And he addressed over 200 African bishops, telling us with this technology, you can solve the problem of herdsmen, can solve the problem of Boko Haram occupying more land, because you can give rain even to the desert. We have used this technology to transform the Middle East. And it gains us billions. We don't want you to approach us because we want governments to approach us. You can't pay for it. I approached him during the break. I said, I didn't know that you have codified this science up to this point. And he said, yes, we have. The principles of this science were discovered by Africans, but it was not encouraged. So, with what I said about the technology in the construction of this house is a reflection of what you just said. We have to ask relevant questions about our own problems. Another thing all of you should go away with is that all these cultural enthusiasts in Nigeria are betrayers of their forefathers. Because they are defending what their forefathers trained them to improve upon. You go back 200 years back to find solutions to problems. You are carrying 2 cell phones or 3, and you are still referring to your forefather for a solution to a pain you have in your waist because you think it was caused by a neighbor. So if we are really serious with that's why I said, with the additional exposure we have, with the additional knowledge we have acquired from others, we enhance the initial principles that our ancestors had, and then we move forward. And this is the advantage. Scientific knowledge is cumulative, in the sense that contemporary knowledge in science builds on previous knowledge. But in our context, we are consumers, not producers. Unfortunately, philosophical knowledge is not cumulative. It is not culturally transmitted. It is a personal achievement. That your forefather was a great philosopher does not make you a great philosopher, even if he left all his teachings in writing. When Africans argue that philosophy started in Egypt, I tell them, let us accept it. Will that make all Africans better philosophers? That European philosophy started in Athens, does it make the Greeks better philosophers than Germans and French people?
My Lord Bishop, I think everybody can see that there's something different. As the lawyers would say, I adopt your thoughts as mine. I wholeheartedly adopt all of them. Because you just touched on what we have been saying. This is a view that is described today as trans-colonization. Transcending the colonial situation, transcending it, that's where the trans comes from. Transcending the colonial situation by creativity. And it is an outcome of Afro-constructivism. Progress is made in the world fundamentally by the constructive attitude, the creative attitude. That is what brings in value. This is precisely the angle that we have been trying to push. And just like you said, those who want to look backwards, which Femi Taiwo described as sociocryonics, those who think that Africa is fossilized at a point. You cannot go forward, you cannot go backward. You're defined essentially as an African by what your grandfather did 500 years ago. This is the most stupid thing I've ever seen in the world. The human being is fundamentally a creative being. That is why we are like God in our creativity. Because it is in our creativity that you find reason, your critical attitude, etc., etc. Therefore, you have just summarized, in a way, the position that we have been advancing. I listened to him this morning. That's why I was a little late here. Was advancing the same thing, even though, of course, there are differences between, but it is fundamentally the same point. What we describe in development philosophy are the motive force of history. That's the force that moves people from one stage to the other, is fundamentally their creative output. How they have epistemic create all kinds of creativity. Epistemic creativity in the area of making knowledge, technological creativity, aesthetic creativity, all kinds of creativity. What moves human beings from one stage to another is a creative power. Unfortunately, it is not in Africa. And I don't know, we just have to find it. I give statistics to show that Africa is virtually in the doldrums. You know, doldrums where everything is quiet, nothing is happening. If you look at the statistics of patents show what people have created in a year. For example, you register it, you keep it.
You know, Singapore has 5 million. And in the past 10 years, 2012 to 2021, it has registered almost 4,000 peasants, a population of 5 million. I'm talking about the third world now. I mean the developing world, not America, where we can say we cannot compare with. Malaysia, a population of 32 million, has almost 5,000 patents. Look at Africa. Nigeria, a population of 211, according to the statistics, in these 10 years, registered 522 patents. You can see the difference. But this is even wonderful. Take Ethiopia, a country that was never colonized. You know, where you get all the Rastafarians ever living, because it was never colonized, you know. What do you get? Patents, 5 patents, 5, over, provided by the population of 118 million. In 10 years, 5 patents, just 5. Liberia, a country of 32 million. In this period, then you can, of course, go down, 0 patents. Liberia, 32 million people, living dead people. This is just a matter of just living dead. 32 million, 0. Ghana, 32 million. In the same period, 13 patents. What are we talking about? It means that nothing is happening here. When Father Bishop said that we need to look at this, our creative thing, I just started laughing to myself. This is precisely the point. We are talking about, they took away our, they took away these. My friend, it is not what they took away that matters, it is what you're creating that matters. The world is about identity creation. You can inherit an identity. There is no problem about that. That's one means of having an identity, inheriting from your father, not just like wearing your father's abada. But what makes you another and more potent way of looking at your identity is what you have created. I bring this thing out today. Whether it's a vehicle or an airplane or a work of art or anything, this is what defines me. Professor Princewill made this. This came out of his mind, and this is him. Your children will inherit it. If they like, they modify it. If they like, they build on it. If they like, they throw it away. But a people's identity is fundamentally defined by what they have created. Not in any essential way what they have inherited. So just the last word, a man can inherit all types of wealth and squander it. So let us be mindful. I think, Father Bishop, as I said, I adopt all your thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. We'll take one last other question or comment, then we move. Okay. So I go that way.
Good morning, everybody. I should stand. Okay. Please, can you permit me to sit, because I have so many bags here. If I stand up, all of them will just be disrupted. But in addition to what, my name is Chidinma Chinyeremezi from Unizik precisely. But when Prof. Abokoba was talking about creative identity, what occurred to me was what Schumpeter said in his book, Democracy, Capitalism, and Socialism. I don't know whether I'm so right about it. Joseph Schumpeter, he talked about creative destruction. That for growth to ever occur in an environment or society, sorry, let me just catch my breath. I think I'm breathing too fast. The eyes are all of me, please. But at the same time, yes, for development and for things to come into being, there must be this creative destruction. At first, you ask, what is creative destruction? What is creative about destroying something? Then this throws me back to when our Lord Bishop was at a Zoom conference with the University of Leiden sometime years back, around 2021, that was organized by University of Leiden. It was aired on Facebook. I listened to it on Facebook, where a lady asked, how can we complement our values and the values about Africans and the rest of them, and contemporary ideas about existence. And you said something there that have been with me all this while. You said that we must destroy those values that should be destroyed and maintain the ones that should be maintained. And that is also in line with creative destruction of, Joseph Schumpeter, that we must constantly creatively destroy some of those things that are making us the way we are. Now, coming down to the Nigerian situation now, all of us are like, this idea of otuaka isi emia. It's always very predominant in our actions, in our attitudes, and the way we do things. When you come and ask somebody, maybe professors or anything, be like, so, but this is not actually right. This is not really like, in the contemporary world, this is not what is obtainable now. They'll be like, otuaka isi emia, otuaka isi, otuaka. Like, okay, you get out. It kills knowledge, it kills growth, it kills development. And at the same time, because I'm saying this from a personal perspective, and an encounter I've had with people when you go out with your contemporaries outside the scope of Nigeria, you see that you are backward in whatever you are doing. You can't even. Their knowledge, their ideas that are constant, they are coming. When you come out there and when you want to discuss with them, you see that you are in 1950s or whatever. You are bringing up ideas that are just archaic and So I think we should imbibe this idea of Joseph Schumpeter's creative destruction in our doings and in our activities. Thank you very much.
Just before I forget, I thank Professor Abakoba because I am amused when we blame the colonialists for all our woes. I am amused because you find us criticizing Europeans, especially the British, for what they have done to us, and we are doing that in English, which we would not have had to tell the rest of the world our ideas if we weren't colonized. And we forget also that that experience is part of our history and a part of the history of almost every human race. This transcolonialization or transcolonialism is so important to me because there are certain positive things we now have which we would not have had without the rough and ugly encounter with the Europeans. It was not all negative. We have to be honest about it. And that is just where the selective choices become very important. The Indians were colonized, by the way. The Chinese were. The Jews had been longest history of colonization in the world are the Jews. But that colonization made them resilient. So what thought pattern or what products, material or ideal, have we produced to counter possible colonization in future? Rather, we have continued to be consumers. The educational system that the Europeans introduced in order to produce the clerks they needed, the educational system that missionaries introduced in order to produce the catechists they needed, that is what we are maintaining and we are criticizing them. Introduce your own now to solve your own problems and fill your own needs. My dear lady, my Oga is Jesus Christ. And he was the first who told the Jews, look, destroy this temple. It is no longer useful. And that is my position. I said it, if something that we thought was a value has become a disvalue, it has to be suppressed. That is my clear position. Because such things are always based on the level of knowledge we have. And if we know better, we choose better. So this creative destruction is even, I think, remind me that, was it Locke or who talked about the destruction of the idols? Francis Bacon. And if you talk about destruction of idols, it also comes to the point where you hold somebody as your ideal and so on. You will never grow until you're able to discover the limitations of that person. And that is already a type of destruction of your idol. Only God cannot be superseded. And Sir Prof, I'm not surprised that you became a believer in Moscow. Because one of my teachers, Viktor Frankl, says, an atheist is only a person who has no courage to ask further questions. Because if you push the question and push the question and push the question, you will arrive at a point where you will admit there must be a higher level of meaning. Even though I don't understand it, it makes sense. And that is what atheism often refuses. Sometimes atheists are people who are angry at God for not existing.
Let me come here first.
Dr. Simeon Dimonye, Philosophy Department, UNN. My question, I asked that bearing in mind the allusion you made to Nigeria as being a multicultural nation, which is evident, of course. Number two, of bearing in mind the philosophy, our team, philosophy and the remaking of the Nigerian nation. And also bearing in mind that the table at which you are sitting is inspiration table. So bearing in mind these three things, I want to ask, what role should philosophy play to stem the storm of disaggregation, disharmony, and disintegration of the Nigerian nation? In fact, what does restructuring mean to you? And how can philosophy take the government to task on this? Not only to do it, but also to be sincere about it. Thank you.
Dr. Anye here is a political philosopher. Maybe he should be the person to answer that question better. Well, when I say our ancestors were wiser and more creative, your question confirms. If we had accepted the structure proposed by the founding fathers of Nigeria, we wouldn't be where we are now. And the more complex the society becomes, the more we have to revise that proposal, but not by more fusion. This is my honest position. Those who think that everything must be at the center and the center would command everything, they are not sincere. I'm a bishop. I have 375 priests working under me in 215 parishes. I cannot macro-manage these parishes and priests. Every parish has its relative autonomy that is inspired by the general rules of the church, domesticated in the diocese. And parishes are grouped in deaneries, and they are overseen by the deans who report back to the center. And as a matter of fact, in our diocese, there is no central fund. We have parish funds standing. The diocese collects funds as needs arise. It's not the best, but just to give you an idea, if you are surprised at how Nsukka is developing from the point of view of Catholic Church, it's because there is no over-centralization. I have told people that one institution that has never claimed to be democratic is the best institution to teach Nigerians and Africans about governance, the Catholic Church. That is because I have published before on the issue of democracy, which I call an illusion for Africans. Representative government is not necessarily a democracy. And you learn from the Catholic Church. We have the highest advisory body and decision-making body in the Catholic Church is called the Diocesan Pastoral Council. The Diocesan Pastoral Council is made up of representatives and leaders of the church in parishes. And the leaders of the church in those parishes are drawn from the leaders of the zones. They say that was the option A for whatever that was used in the election of Abiola. Let the grassroots decide based on criteria of service. Oga or Madam, now you go represent us for Obolafo. And when all the representatives in Obolafo have gathered, they decide from there, the way you behave, go and represent us in Enugu. And when they have selected those who represent them in Enugu, you go and represent us in Abuja. But at every level, there's a level of autonomy and growth. Without this, I don't see how we will move forward. No matter the name you call it. This is, by the way, personal to me. It's my own opinion. So I don't know whether that answers your question about multiculturalism. Thank you very much.
Prof wants to say something.
My Lord Bishop, distinguished, very learned colleagues, I just want to make small trouble. Philosophers are intellectual troublemakers, not physical troublemakers, because they try to see whether they can think deeper than others. This is part of the trouble that I normally make with Abakoba secretly, and he has steered it here. With Abakoba, Professor Abakoba, secretly. And that is the extent to which we can go thinking the way we are thinking. One of the fine articles I like reading about this is the one that Professor Kere left, Public Morality and Private Morality. He talked of the Holocaust, that it happened. He talked of colonialism, that it happened. And he asked one question, I don't know, we were with a bishop. Why is it that these things happened, like most of them, or many of them happened, and we are carried out by Christians? Why? Not all, but some, or perhaps many. Now, the answer is probably that what we are talking about is about the state, and we are talking about the Western state, symbolized by the gun. Symbolized by the gun. And if it is symbolized by the gun, we must make a distinction between the state here, the society here, and science here. So maybe ask ourselves the question, what is happening to us as a people? Is it the state that we begin to question, we begin to ask the question, is it possible to have an African state? And what would it mean? I ask this question because researches have been done, and we discovered that there was no policeman in the traditional African state. The states, the police were those gods. If you talk lies, you're going. So probably what we want to do is to make human beings to act in that way. That's the kind of thing you are seeing as state structures all over the place. I don't know how far we can go, but we must ask this question. The bishop will answer. Okay, sorry. These are the kind of things we are trying to do. Now, colonialism happened, yes. But recently, China barred their people from watching Goggle. They don't watch Goggle. I have a friend who's a professor in the US, he's a professor in China, and we talk every day. So they select what their people should know, how their people should think. And that is why they are surviving. That is why they are becoming stronger every day. So I am thinking that the past that we want to wish away may be the past that our grandchildren will run back to. I am not saying they are going to stay there, but there are values that we may need to get, or we continue to function under European moral paternalism and state paternalism. They construct the state, they construct the ideas, they construct the ideologies, and we keep on battling and battling and battling with it. And we remain precisely where we are, if not going backwards. As I'm talking now, I'm owed 8 months' salary after lecture, as a lecturer, probably because I'm a lecturer. The bishop is a pro-chancellor of a university. You can imagine how someone can think if he's not paid 8 months' salary.
Okay. ESUT is not owing any worker, except maybe arrears of allowances accumulated by past governments. Now, you see, that brings us to the question, how far can philosophy go? We have to distinguish between poesis and theorian. Poesis is action. Theorian is thought that leads to action. We can't all be experts in everything. Some have to develop ideas, others will use the ideas. When Kant was outlining his principles, his categorical imperatives, which he thought were only for morality, he never guessed how much impact it would make in the politics of modern Europe. So once we have thought out right principles, we shouldn't be worried about when they will be put into practice. Which brings me also to modification of what we often wrongly quote. I'm not sure Plato says until philosophers become kings or kings become philosophers. He said that philosophers become kings or kings become serious students of philosophy. Because Kwame Nkrumah was a philosopher. Leopold Sedar Senghor was a philosopher. They ruled Senegal and Ghana. I'm not sure their countries were better when they were ruling them, just because they were philosophers. Rules are divided. So we have to be careful about thinking that until we turn our theory into praxis, we are not making any contribution. The same thing even with religion. Religion provides the principles, true religion provides the principles upon which morality is developed. And without those principles and proper morality, there is no control to the capacity of human beings to abuse their powers. That brings me to the question of Christianity, slavery, colonialism. Yes, there is the natural tendency in human beings to dominate others. And religion and morality provide checks to those tendencies. Colonialism and slavery did not begin with Christians. Till today in Igbo land, people are enslaved, and some people can marry whom they want because those people are considered slaves. Till today. And we are saying we are Christians. Those people have no rights, they have no land, they have no titles. But the difference is that we often forget that no culture has so internalized the principles of Christianity as to be totally transformed by it. Yes, Europeans became Christians, but they remained children of Adam and Eve. And there were elements of their life that were never touched by the Christian principles. Otherwise, they would not have become slave dealers or colonial masters. Otherwise, they would not be developing political and economic principles that continue to enslave the rest of the world today. But it is thanks to Christianity that you have people within the same system that will raise a voice of objection and say, this is not right. We are all familiar. Anybody here who doesn't know William Anton Amo should leave the Department of Philosophy. We are familiar with his thesis about the Jure Mores in Europa, where he used Christian principles and the principles of the Roman law, which he had learned in Germany, to criticize the Europeans about their attitude to the blacks. And he told them, you are contradicting your own principles. That is what religion, Christianity, does to us. It provides the principles of internal rejection of evil or internal revolution against evil. It is one religion that I have known where evil that has become culture, people say, when bad practice takes a long time, it becomes part of culture. In Christianity, one day, somebody will pick up the sacred scripture or the teachings of the church and tell you, Pope, Bishop, Father, you can't do this. It is against our religion. That is the beauty of Christianity. So I will always say, let us not judge Christianity by the mistakes of Christians. Let us judge Christianity by its basic teachings. The only person whose conduct should be used to judge Christianity is its founder, Jesus Christ. Every other person is only a shabby imitation of him.
Please, my Lord, I want to make a special appeal. I want to stop now, but there is a question that is related to the geography that I'm coming from. To the geography that I'm coming from, and I want you to address. A question from the north. My HOD, please, say something.
My Lord, my name is Paul Haga from Federal University of Lafayette. Lafayette. In fact, the Bishop of Lafayette have asked us that we should greet you. He's your son. Yes, your spirit, and you are his mentor. Yes. He has told us that. I live in the north, and I was born and brought up in Kaduna and Kano, in a place where for someone to understand philosophy is difficult. You know, my contact with philosophy is because I was trained by the church. Yeah, I know you understand what I mean. I was trained by the church. My contact with philosophy is because I was trained by the church. And your question, my question centers around your submission regarding philosophy interrogating all religious values. I know that is very easy with Christianity. For ATR, I know the African traditionalists will tell us better. But for Islam, that is conservative, how can philosophy interrogate these Islamic values? Like with particular reference with what happened with Deborah, the late Deborah in Sokoto, where you have some Islamic scholars even justifying and saying, if you say more, we shall come for your head. How can philosophy interrogate some of these values? Thank you.
Let us not forget that there was a time when some Christian thinkers justified murder. But within the same Christian system, people arose and said, this cannot be right. What happened to Islam? Started in Turkey. And when the Ottoman dynasty came to power, it suppressed the application of critical thinking to the teaching of the Quran. That is their tragedy. But that does not prevent others from constantly assessing the values of Islam and throwing it to them to their face. This policy or principle or this value can no longer be sustained. Who would have ever thought that Iranian women will be protesting for months, going to jail and being killed against the veil. It's a piece of cloth, but for them it represents domination that they no longer want to accept. That may be a sign of rebirth of critical thinking applied to Islamic teaching. The Turks tried to correct the mistake of their ancestors, but the present regime in Turkey suppressed it. So there was a time when Islamic scholars were debating with Christian scholars. Islamic philosophers were debating with Christian philosophers. And in private, it is still happening. So I always say, think of the values and their relationship with life. And even when you don't share common religious belief, we share common human nature. And that common human nature becomes a ground for some dialogue of reason. Pope St. John Paul II in Fides et Ratio said this in 1998, when he taught that very often philosophy represents the only ground for intercultural and interreligious dialogue. When you start with the Trinity, you can no longer sit with a Muslim to discuss. But when you start off, what exactly does human dignity mean? And what are the pillars that sustain the human dignity? You can agree on this and say, I don't agree on that. He will tell you, but it is in the Quran. But you say, look at it now. If we do this, it reduces the human dignity even though it is in the Quran. And you already establish a need for some reinterpretation of that teaching, even if he doesn't accept it immediately. So I think, in spite of the differences, philosophy can still help in intercultural and interreligious dialogue.
So, thank you. Okay. Prof, you want to say something?
Do I use some kind of privilege of past president's privilege? You can see again how right our Lord Bishop is. The question of the internal logic of a religion is only in Christianity they define the abolition of colonization and slavery. According to the internal logic, Islam was forced to abolish slavery. Saudi Arabia abolished 1962. They had slavery for over 1,000 years here. More slaves were exported from here via the transatlantic, via the Red Sea. Where are those slaves? They were decimated because the men were castrated. What about Genghis Khan and how he destroyed the whole of Asia and Europe? Read world history. What about the blacks that first went to Latin America, destroyed by the Red Indians? Look, history is bloody. So let us not look at colonization as something in terms of what is happening in a teacup. Look globally, you will see the bloodiness of history, and you see how other people overcame it by the creativity they had, the adversity quotient they had in their being, and their trans-colonial capacity. Thank you very much, my Lordship.
All right. Thank you very much. We thank all those who are there. Okay. Okay. You want to say something?
No, I say, can I go now?
One last thing, please. My Lord, we want to go into a very solemn part of our gathering. I remember that when we did the letter to my Lord, inviting him for this event, we also did a letter that we're going to honor him as a fellow of this association. He was not here yesterday, but since he's here today, I will invite the president to quickly carry out that ceremony.
May I please have the honor to invite His Lordship for the award which we slated for him. This is the point at which we would have read the citation. But that is not a problem. Let me invite Professor Agbakoba to assist here. Let's roll the... We'll just put it there.
This one doesn't have.
Yeah. Yes. And this is an award of honorary fellowship presented to Most Reverend Professor Godfrey I. Onah by the Association of Philosophy Professionals of Nigeria for his contributions and commitment to philosophy in Nigeria on this day, 9th December 2022. Signed, the President, Professor Aloy Ihua, and the Secretary, Dr. Philip Idachaba. Congratulations. And because of the disconnect in communication, we couldn't draw the plaque, but we do that and we will send it to you at the appropriate time, not too long from now. Congratulations. Come now. Welcome.
Can I have a microphone? I thank this association and its leadership for this honor. I am not accustomed to being honored, but I appreciate this profoundly, and it encourages me because I am aware that my training in philosophy has helped my priestly ministry. And I believe in whatever other area of life you find yourself engaged, if you took your own training in philosophy seriously, it will also help you. Because that thing that makes us similar to God, makes us different, and makes us common is reason. And philosophy trains us in the good use, proper use of our reason. Over the years, my area of engagement in research, reflection, and teaching in philosophy, my areas have been many, but the point of departure has always been the metaphysics of human nature, what it means to be human, because that for me forms the basis of my understanding of the human way of engaging in other areas of life. So I thank you, and I encourage you not to be discouraged by the fact that the result of your effort may not be immediately visible. Good things take time. These seedlings and seeds we plant now in Nigeria that we begin to harvest within 3 months, they may not be the best. The best of the seedlings and seeds may take many years before they begin to bear fruit. So it is also with the best of your reflections. They may take many years before they begin to bear fruit. So don't be discouraged, and we continue this exercise in service of our nation and in continuation of the expression of our intimate relationship with our Creator. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Where the person who sent me picture? I got this one and I will send for you.